All right, hey everyone. Happy Friday. Sorry for the slight delay and hiccup. It wasn't really my fault. It definitely wasn't Nate's fault. It was maybe Elon's fault, but probably just heavy DDoSing of X because he's it's a spicy thing these days. So, what do you think, Nate? Actually, do you think
Spicy
it was a
memester Elon. Could have been X. I know Cursor was down earlier. The ChatGPT Claude
mm-hmm,
powered tool. So could be just heavy internet usage. People like their internet. Um,
mm-hmm.
I don't know. Good question. State sponsored attacks, maybe. I don't know.
I'm always gonna go for that one. I'm always gonna think that I'm somehow important enough that they wanted to shut down this show. You know, it's it's just like the it's kind of like the Monero strategy of like anytime there's a delisting or a problem, it's always like that's because we're too dangerous, man. It's just like that's even if it's not true, why not go for that? Why not
Did you
spin it in your
see?
yeah.
You might have talked about this on a previous show, but a couple weeks ago, Monero was like, "Oh, by the way, like the anonymity set is 1.25 the
Yes.
people." Like, it's yeah,
I have so that's something that actually some guy I'm working with right now is on like some dash related stuff is the guy who wrote basically did the write up of that of how that could be how the two different attacks could be combined and stuff like that. It wasn't really super public, and I sort of made it more public. And then Zcashers have traditionally been really just chill, classy people, but after being like after all the FUD from the Monero community, there have been a lot of salty, petty people that were just like, no, we're going to blast this news everywhere.
yeah.
And so, as a result of that, Vlad Kostia, I don't know if you know that guy, he's been getting like death threats from Monero community via Zcash encrypted memos, which is
Wow.
perfect irony. So
Yeah,
that's
that
great.
is pretty ironic. Um, huh. Well, yeah, that one was I so I'm pretty sure they just join an attacker would just join the rings and fill up the majority of the rings. Is that kind of the idea?
Yeah, there was two of them. The more recent one was a statistical analysis thing that basically if you just look at it over a long period of time with certain things, I'm not smart enough to know the details, of course, but it seems like you could get that ring size down to like 4.2 about. And then if
Okay.
you then hit it with a flooding attack as well, then you could kind of get it down to like 1.3. So, yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
full chain membership proofs couldn't come soon enough.
I know.
It's good to be working on these things, but also the thing is, I think you could still use Monero safely and privately, like most people, with no extra anything, because you're not going to have those things trying to target you in your freaking coffee spends. But the problem is they heavily marketed to literal like criminals, and those people, I don't know. I wouldn't want to be a criminal for a lot of reasons, but add this to another reason.
Good incentive not to be a criminal.
Yeah, like generally
Yeah,
speaking, like that's the thing is I'm always, you know, I'm taxation is theft and all the rest, but I do think people should try to follow all the laws that they can just as a general guideline. Like that's the default. And then if you want to break a law, that's a big risk in depending on the country you're in. So just that's on you if you decide to do that. But it's like practically speaking, I'd be careful with that.
yeah, definitely. I've always this attack was interesting because I've thought about for a long time the first component of it. I don't know about the statistical analysis piece, but like you could prove that someone was doing that flooding attack just by doing the flooding attack yourself. And I wanted to see people try that over time, but I also didn't want to like tip off everybody on like how to do this, tip off the government or Chainalysis and like how to do an attack on Monero just by becoming the majority of the ring sizes. So
Yeah.
this is something that it always seemed like pretty, low hanging fruit in terms of de-anonymization. But yeah, full chain membership proofs will be great. I don't know why Monero resisted it so long. Zcash clearly had a better anonymity set with the like ZK accumulator kind of model. Problem there is it's not by default. So shout out to Pirate Chain known for having like the best like cryptographic technical piece, but then Monero's got a lot more tools out of the box, and so it's always seemed to me like the Zcash versus Monero debate was always silly, because it was like the Zcash people saying we're technically superior, and the Monero people were saying, yeah, but like empirically and practically not. And I've always been saying, like, just combine the tech, like just do the good parts of both.
I do think that the tech is going to converge at some point. Like, I do think that everything good is going to have some sort of ZK style privacy. At some point, everything that's used by anyone will have some manner of darknet usage. Everything will have any kind of useful thing will also have a lot of like regular people usage. And, it's kind of like how you see a lot of projects doing like a hybrid POS, POW kind of thing. There's a lot more DAOs now. There's a lot more like instant transactions. Everyone's trying to do programmability. Like a lot of these things that everyone's like, I'll do my special thing. And then eventually they're like, consensus comes around what you need. And it starts to like condense chains into like kind of the similar models.
Yeah. Yeah, I think ideally it would have, I like something you said there. Ideally, we would have a lot of normal people, everyday users going for privacy in their transactions. So I don't think that happens unless there's privacy by default. And I'm like a huge fan of EIP 7503 on Ethereum. Everyone watching should go look this up right now. It's called ZK wormholes. So you basically burn ETH and then you pull it out at a fresh address. And as soon as this gets implemented, there's plausible deniability around the entire anonymity set. So it's like, it's the best of both worlds, where you have traceability and you also have like a degree of anonymity. So EIP 7503 is one to look up. Follow them on Twitter. It's a sick project. I hope it gets implemented. But we did have some good news in privacy on Ethereum this week that we were going to talk about.
Yeah, for sure. Last thing that just reminds me about the wormhole type thing. Zcoin, or Firo as it's known now, used to have that as their kind of privacy model, something where you send something into the burn state and it mint fresh coins when you'd send them. So something like that. All right, let's hit the intro and then start rolling into these stories here. All right, 3, 2, 1, go. So, hey everyone, officially ESC. Welcome to the Digital Cash Rundown, episode 188. I'm joined by the one and only Nate of EatSleepCrypto. How's it going, man? Going
well. It's good. I didn't realize we were off the record for that last bit. Probably a good thing, actually.
Well,
probably good for. Nice to be an insider at the Dash News Network podcast. But that was a good bit there.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, so first of all, it was on the record, but it was the pre-show, and also this is a personal podcast, Digital Cash Network, not really related to Dash. I did it for 3 years before, 3-4 years before I started full time with Dash last year. So
right,
yeah, I intentionally did sort of add a little bit of ambiguity in the logo and title to be like, well, it's similar to this, but it's more generic. So yeah.
I'm just mixing your old names, but yeah, I'm totally fine with that bit being on the record. It's just like, it's funny that we're talking about some privacy things, and then we'll go into the privacy things here in a sec.
Yeah, everything for me is on the record. If people want to ask me anything, you can ask me anything, and I might not be able to answer it, but I'll tell you. I'll be like, yeah, well, that's kind of NDA, but blah, blah, blah. Just, that's fine. Like the shirt, by the way. Obviously, I've been doing martial arts for a long time. It was kind of Jackie Chan who inspired me to get into martial arts, but then pretty quickly, like when you start to become more of a nerd, then Bruce Lee's like, oh yeah, that guy's all this stuff, and everyone wanted those abs, and to break people's necks, like he did in the
yeah. Jackie Chan was the gateway drug. Rush Hour.
Yes, a fantastic movie. Which, by the way, I heard that he didn't like or want to do. He didn't think it would do well, but then it did. He's like, okay, I guess I'll do more.
It crushed. Yeah, those were hilarious. I love
Yes.
them.
So let me get the shilling out of the way and then get this thing going. Here, where are we over here? Yeah. So this podcast is very proudly sponsored by Coin ATM Radar, who had the generosity to reach out to me and be like, "We're probably going to lose money on you, but we like what you say, so here you go." So when you buy crypto with cash, an ATM is so much more reliable and safer than meeting some random person in a random place. And unlike an exchange which could freeze your account, you truly own all the crypto you buy. With Coin ATM Radar, you can find crypto ATMs and other services where you could buy or sell cryptocurrencies for cash. On their website, search by coin, address, if the ATM supports selling as well as buying, and you can also search by geo area, such as country, state, or city. And you can compare actual current fees at different ATMs. Find out more, go over to coinatmradar.com, which is coinatmradar.com. Might have been one of the smoother reads yet. I'm still working on it.
Dialing it in.
You know, it's funny. I can't remember. It was like over the holiday break or whatever. I did an ad for BitRefill, an unpaid one, just impromptu, because I'm like, I'm showing these guys so much anyway. Let me just do an ad real quick. And it was not nearly as smooth. Apparently, practicing saying the same shit over and over does kind of work.
News to me.
Yeah, well, it can work. It makes you sound slightly less dumb than usual. But let's hit on the Tornado Cash thing, right? So, as I showed up on the thing, there's a zero hedge thing, and my comment on it about the most high-profile case against privacy. Crypto is now officially over. Sanctions have been lifted off Tornado Cash. So, what do you think?
I'm stoked. It was quite a surprise for me. It was just out of nowhere. I saw like my entire Twitter feed blew up, and it was like Tornado Cash just got taken off the OFAC list. Huge surprise. Really welcome. Seems like a huge win. I would say I'm very optimistic. I don't know the legal ins and outs. I've seen some legal opinions, and seems like this is overall like pretty good news. I don't know if there's like another shoe that drops, but yeah, I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to the whole thing where like I've been in the political world a little bit. Even as my previous career before I got into crypto, and it's still what the missus does for since I was a young teen, and I kind of like I've gotten obviously cynical, but realistic is maybe a better way of describing it about what we can get from government. And I did feel like things would change for the better this last election, and the things that I wanted from it I wanted Ross to be free, which I thought that if Trump won, it'd be like a 50% chance. I thought it was like a coin flip. And then I wanted the nonsense against crypto to stop, like not super favorable this or that, just like the attacks. Right. And so both of those things, I got everything I wanted on those bits. So then everything else is a little bit like back to cynicism, but like, I'm like, yeah, finally we got something good out of this,
Yeah, definitely. I felt like Ross was like an indicator of whether Trump would keep any of his other promises, and he did. And I've heard criticisms that like it doesn't take a lot of political capital to get Ross out or to let him out of jail. But I think it was a huge thing, and it's been so cool to see Ross like tweeting about like he's like I'm at the beach, or like I'm in a national park, or like I'm grilling for my birthday, and it's just like so cool to see him like back in a normal life. It's been awesome to watch, and then see his occasional tweets about eBay, the problems with eBay, which we can get into. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been great. It's been beautiful to watch for sure. I definitely think that especially since when you have a pioneer, you have lots of pioneers of things. A lot of times you really disrupt the powers that be in huge ways, and they try to smash you. Systems do not like threats to them. And he was kind of like that first one that was just like, we are going to deregulate all commerce and all money in trade just right now. And it's like, oh, like when I heard about the Silk Road, I kind of got I started in crypto sort of like 2012. I got my first Bitcoin 2013, mid 2013, like just 3 months before the Silk Road got taken down. So I kind of like came into it with this. And I remember my first thoughts were, of course, this is not going to end well for this guy. Like, obviously I thought it was awesome, but also, yeah, they're going to get this guy. And then they did. And I kind of thought that was going to be it. Like the Irwin Schiff treatment, he'd be gone forever. And to see him out is kind of a sign of like, it's sort of like a symbol of optimism, of like techno optimism, of whatever, for just the future of the species, kind of. Maybe I'm inflating that a little bit too much, but I kind of feel like in the old ways, you had lots of blood spilled to get anything good, anything improvement. And here it's just like the biggest, highest profile person of this like crypto war just managed to get the rest of his life back. And he didn't just get released. He's like running around with like a family. He's got a celebrity status. He's got money now, like all this stuff. Like it's actually turned out well for him. And that's just like, wow, you mean we can kind of do anything? This is great.
Yeah, definitely. I hear you on like an optimistic sign for the future of humanity and like this administration's actions, maybe their treatment of crypto. Similar to you, when I first heard about Silk Road, I was like, wow, this is important. And it's actually what got me into crypto. I heard my friend told me about Silk Road, and I said, how are they not shut down? He's like, yeah, it's been running for a couple of years now. And I was like, what do you mean it's been running for a couple of years? Like, how are they doing like financial transactions? Like how has this not been shut down by the government? Like all they have to do is shut down someone's bank account or, go after the traces of people that are in this giant ring. And he's like, yeah, they're using this thing called Bitcoin. And so I ended up going down the rabbit hole because I heard about Silk Road from a friend. And that like, it was, that was a lot of people's in. That was a lot of the OG cypherpunks, the libertarian crowd's way into crypto. I think each year in crypto, like each class of whatever, Bitcoin class of 2013 was the libertarians. It was the Silk Road people, 2013, 2014. That was like, maybe even before that, it was similarly minded people that had heard about it through Ron Paul, like going to, being part of that campaign and the rallies and things like that. Before then was like some of the cypherpunks and some of the deeply technical people that were around early in the space. And over time, the values kind of have evolved and gotten diluted by the new people that have come in. But yeah, those were special years because it was Silk Road and Ross by extension that brought everybody in.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I do think that a good chunk of that, of course, is like the libertarian foundation behind the whole thing. But also a lot of it is just the proof of concept for the technology of like, this is what it can do. And people are like, oh, and then they want to do the Bitcoin of X, Y, Z, then it just becomes everything at that point. And so, but that first proof of concept that you can do permissionless commerce, that can't be censored or is hard to censor. That I think that started the whole thing, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it showcased the censorship resistant nature of crypto. And it was basically just Bitcoin back then. There were a bunch of useless clones of Bitcoin and
hey, leave Litecoin out of this.
Worse than useless. Yeah, but no, that was the proof of concept. Would love to see a revival of that. But I before we jump into Ross's eBay tweaks, I do want to talk about that because I think it's interesting and kind of funny. I want to hear your thoughts on the Trump administration's treatment of crypto broadly. We went from Tornado Cash to Silk Road.
Yeah.
But what are you thinking about? Like, how are you thinking about that?
So there's just a lot of like unanswered things, but so far it seems there's two big things at play. One of which is we're seeing just not the Biden administration. It's not so much it's the Trump administration. We're seeing
Right.
not those guys who went on a crazy war to try to like, illegally in any way they could, extra legally find ways to just like smash and destroy as much of this industry as they could, because of Elizabeth Warren's banking friends and stuff, right? I mean,
Right.
and other people. So some of it's that. The other thing is, like, I'm not going to be too. I mean, the cynical positive take on this, which is what I'll choose to adopt here, is every administration, every government has like a long list of people they owe favors to, and unfortunately, I think when we saw this like before the America First vibe that's coming out now, we saw a lot of people with these super entrenched, like multi-generational deals, like where every single president had interests in these large multinational organizations, groups, interests, etc., and they just had to pay them all off. Whereas I kind of feel like sort of in the first administration, Trump had like nobody. He just sort of showed up and was winging it, And this time, in order to get in a big way, he made a bunch of deals, a bunch of public deals, I guess. But like that's like a coalition building, I guess. And so crypto is one of those. The crypto industry is one of those things he owed a bunch of favors to. And then, of course, whatever tariff thing, maybe the tariff thing was his own idea and he didn't owe that to anyone. But then I'm sure he owed a lot of like Israel stuff going on. Again, not to get too crazy into that, but like there's a bunch of things he owed. And it's actually full. It's sort of like a return. It's cynical, but it's a return to way politics should be if politics exists at all, which is campaign promises. He said, I will do X, Y, Z if you elect me. And then as soon as he gets in there, he does X, Y, Z. And that, I don't think he gives a crap about crypto one way or the other. But he promised the crypto pros who gave him a lot of money and pushed him over the line. And like the libertarians, stuff like that. I still want to know what he's giving for the liberty community explicitly. But like for the crypto, you better get, maybe that was Ross, maybe that was the crypto people. But there's a little bit of a lack of delineation between
Big
those.
overlap.
But I think
that's a good thing. The bigger the overlap there, the better, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I agree. With crypto, I think the big thing was, the Winklevoss gave him $1 million each. Jesse Powell gave him $1 million. A bunch of people came in hard for him. And then he was the big thing was get the SEC off our freaking backs. And then the second thing is not from the SEC, but like from the Treasury Department, stop persecuting crypto builders and stuff. And so he just was like, done, got rid of that. And then they're like, well, we want a strategic reserve too. And he's just like, how about we I'll cut you a deal. How about we do it with coins we already have, right?
Yeah.
Everyone is all pissed off, but like he threw the bone. He did the thing. He's like, I'm done now. Like, dude, haven't I done enough for you guys? So, I got other campaign promises to fulfill. So that's kind of where I feel like it's at. I feel like I feel like it's he just kind of like backed off, and now everything is kind of back to the normal where it should have been, I guess.
Yeah.
Although I have to say, even the Biden administration's crackdowns on crypto came much less and much later than 2013 myself was thinking. Like, and I thought that there would be like a war against crypto and not so much of we kind of let it happen, but we're trying to like smash a lot of the actors in the space and imprison some high profile people to scare and FUD. It's like, I thought it'd be worse. So now it's just like open season, kind of. Now where it gets weird is what happens if there's stablecoin bills that are coming up that start to say you need to have dollar backing, so algo stables aren't really legal in some ways, and like that could get really nasty. But I don't know. I'm enjoying it as far as we have.
Yeah. I don't know what the future of the regulation from the U.S. is going to look like, but I tend to agree that narrative makes sense. Where Trump is like, I kind of think Trump's actions suggest that he doesn't really differentiate between useful projects in crypto and like total shit coins, I don't think he knows the difference at all. I don't think he knows there's a distinction. Like, I think he thinks it's all just meme coins and maybe stable coins. Like, he doesn't, the way the SEC has backed off projects like across the board is, you know, we were talking about Hawk Tua coin. Like, this,
get that
like,
that point. We got to get to that in a second.
We'll get
I
to
do.
it.
It is very on brand for him because if you look at what he's sold in his life, it's been a lot of crap. It's just whatever, like Trump steaks or whatever random, whatever he can sell and people want, he just doesn't care. I want to highlight this live stream comment from Inleo here. I can't, some random freaking username, I don't know, says Bitcoin class of 2013. I got Bitcoin through the Silk Road. Bitcoin class of 2024. I got Bitcoin through BlackRock. Yeah.
Yeah. True.
Unfortunate. True. Sad, but true.
I think the last, it became like more about the tech, and now it's about the money. Yeah.
So I want to highlight the Hawk Tua one because you mentioned that. So Justin, sure. Hawk Tua girl Haley Welch says the SEC closed its investigation into her crypto meme coin that crashed 95% hours after launch. She says that they will not pursue any charges or monetary sanctions. And just because it's there, the top comment there says, she definitely Hawk Tua the judge.
Yeah. I was thinking of a good way to say that. That's great.
Yeah. It is one of the most bald-faced kind of like, I don't know if scam is the right word, but casino games as far as this is concerned. It was funny that people were talking about being like pursuing legal actions because of damages, but like if you buy the spit on the dick coin from this basically teenager who has nothing, what do you expect? I think a judge would have thrown that out anyway. The SEC decided not to pursue, but I think a judge would be like, this is the clearest case of buyer beware in the world. Like,
Yeah. I mean, at some point it would be nice if the government were just like, hey, crypto is buyer beware. Like, this is, there's no better business bureau for this sector, and like, go in at your own risk. I've always felt like that would be the best outcome for us in terms of, us as crypto natives and cypherpunks. I think the way I've always thought of it is like, we've got this sandbox over here that is not only like kind of immoral for them to regulate because we fucking built it, it's like not possible for them to regulate because of its own nature. And so them trying to regulate is counterproductive in addition to like immoral. Like, I'm very much like, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. Yeah, sure. You can tax the centralized exchanges, fucking go for it. But like, don't come over here, piss in our sandbox, and then tell us how to build it or like how to fix it. Like, we're doing this crypto stuff, and like other people can come in, and unfortunately a lot of grifters can come in. But I mean, that's the direction I hope regulation goes. I think there are incentives there we could talk about that are going to cause it to move in a different direction. But just my two cents there.
There's always going to be capture somewhere. But let's hit on this Polygon thing for just a second, because it was next on the queued up thing, and it's something I admittedly don't know a ton about, but it's very interesting to me. Where we go. So the Woo blockchain post: governance attack occurred on Polymarket, where a UMA, which is I guess the oracle they use, a tycoon, used his voting power to manipulate the oracle, allowing the market to settle false results and successfully profit. The tycoon cast 5 million tokens through 3 accounts, accounting for 25% of the total votes. Polymarket is committed to preventing this from happening again. So do you want to sort of TLDR on the how does this UMA thing work? How does how do they actually determine the outcomes for these votes?
Yeah, so the people that hold these UMA tokens, have to come to consensus on the results of a real world event, and it's entirely based on who has the most tokens or where the most tokens decide. Like it's completely subjective. And this is the issue or an issue with prediction markets, oracles. It's also an issue with UMA. UMA is shelling point based, so it's like the game theory optimal result for UMA is like vote the way, as an UMA voter, is vote the way you think everyone else is going to vote. And we would hope that that is truth, oriented toward truth. But sometimes truth is ambiguous. Like facts are difficult to, sometimes the market is difficult to interpret. Like the wording of a market is unclear. Sometimes the facts themselves are unclear in the time period that they're supposed to be decided on, that prevent the proper resolution of a Polymarket prediction market instance. The first time this had happened, or there have been many issues with Polymarket, a lot of economic exploits, a lot of vulnerabilities, and keep track of them in our GitHub repo at Token Dynamics XYZ for anyone that's interested. There's been a bunch of these. One of them was around RFK. When he dropped out last year, there was some subjectivity around like the market was phrased like, will RFK drop out by Friday? And most people were saying, yeah, he dropped out. But technically, he didn't really drop out. He just endorsed Trump. And there was this whole question of like, what is the actual answer to the market? And there's no real way to resolve that. And that's kind of like the strength and the weakness of how UMA works. It's based entirely on social consensus. And where this becomes a problem is the ability to purchase social consensus. So this whale basically bought, this oligarch kind of bought these governance tokens, or accumulated these governance tokens, and was able to influence the outcome of the vote, because presumably it was profitable for him and his positions to do so. So there's a lot of other factors like the liquidity of the market versus the cost to accumulate UMA tokens to do this kind of thing. But you can boil it all down to an economic calculation in a sort of a shakily designed game.
Yeah. So there's a lot, like this could be 2 more podcasts in a row starting now on just this thing, I'm sure. One, for an external oracle like that, it's just literally, I don't know of a better way of getting around that problem. I think it just is inherent risk in the system. And if you have a permissionless system where you have governance tokens or whatever like that, I think probably a better way would be some sort of like a DPoS type thing where you can buy tokens, but then you have to vote for people. And the people you vote for then to make the decisions are obviously public. So if you, instead of like a whale accumulating all this stuff and doing something nefarious, you could have a whale accumulate and may vote for some dude who's a little sketch. But then the dude, like you can see that there's a sketch dude on the thing, and then you start just selling or just not betting on the platform at all. That would probably be a better way of fixing it. But at the same time, like it has to be an economic thing. So Polymarket is going to take. So first of all, with this rare earth mineral thing that was hacked, I guess, or was not done the right way, was it just like fake news? Like they completely resolved something that's absolutely not true?
It's a good question. I don't know if that was exactly what happened. I haven't dug into the details of the underlying news. Just I'm just familiar with the mechanisms and Polymarket broadly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let me highlight this post over here. So the fact that Polymarket doesn't have the ability to fork over a bad oracle result is wild. Token vote oracles or multi-sigs or even the whole consensus algorithms can all fail or be bribed. This is insanely well documented. Yeah, so what do you think about that opinion? Do you think that, first of all, why can't it fork? Is it just a technical limitation or was it intentional? And then do you agree with this point or not?
Yeah, I think that was Nick's point. Nick is the CTO of Telor, which is the oracle that I would use to resolve these kinds of disputes because of its mechanism. It has an escalation game where if someone provides the result that people claim is false, then someone else can come in and bid over top and challenge that claim. And there's just this escalation of claims up until someone gets the result that isn't challenged or someone puts up like the most possible tokens. But yeah, so there are, I think Nick is hinting at, there are a few designs of protocols that do the prediction markets or that are oracles that can fork. And Nick is a big proponent of the social layer. So he thinks that things should be generally like settled by either the objective mechanisms or at least give people the ability to opt out of systems that fail. So one that I think he's like subtweeting there is reality.eth. I think it's reality_eth on Twitter. This is Edmund Edgar's project, and it's worth looking at. So they allow people to fork within the protocol to get to the right result. So they have just a series of incentive structures there that prevent this kind of exploit that happened in Polymarket. I don't know how Polymarket intends to guarantee. They said they remain committed to preventing this in the future or something like that. I don't know how they're going to do that. Yeah, I'm not sure what their plan is, but it'll be interesting to see. This is the fourth or so Polymarket related exploit that we've seen in the wild so far.
Yeah.
A couple others were around the manipulation of the markets based on their liquidity. Again, documented on GitHub.
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. I think there's always going to be an incentive for someone to game the system. What I was talking about when it became huge in the election was what happens when people actually game the outcome, like not the decision of the outcome, but the outcome itself based on this.
Yes.
What if RFK is like, you know what? I don't know my, like he knows that he's not going to win probably, and he's just waits till there's like a good bet out there. And it's like, hey, will he drop out by this time? And then he just says, I'm like committed to staying in the race for as long as whatever. And so the odds are way low. And then he just buys the crap out of that bet. And then he just bails and then profits. So there's always going to be that. That's always going to exist. This part is a little like Polymarket is going to get wrecked if this keeps happening. And then whoever bought these tokens to game these votes has to be able to lose more from Polymarket crashing than from just like enforcing the bets. And so that's how you create an economically secure design in a way.
Yeah. Yes.
But yeah.
Yeah, definitely. You make it more profitable for the would-be attackers to act honestly. There's one of my favorite quotes from the Bitcoin white paper. Satoshi said, an attacker ought to find it more profitable to play by the rules and like mint new coins or something like that. It's really well put. And he was talking about the double spending problem, and the manifestations of the double spending problem happen in lots of protocols. Any protocol with a token price dependency, there will be economic security considerations. And so to boil it down, the person voting needs to have more at stake, or needs to stand to benefit more, right? You can have a positive incentive or a negative incentive, but overall the revenue from a potential action should always be greater than the revenue from, or the cost to a potential negative action should always exceed the revenue from it. That's like a premise of economic security and proper protocol design. In this case, the UMA holders are not aligned with Polymarket long term, or at least individual UMA holders in this case are not incentivized to secure Polymarket in the long term. And one of the issues here is like, the amount of tokens that he had was like huge. Like you probably couldn't exit that amount of tokens without deeply affecting the UMA price. And so in a way, this was a way to exit UMA tokens profitably as a whale. And in this specific example, like the UMA token price didn't go to zero, so the whale is still left with something, but he was able to use the tokens without completely destroying their value. So it's like another sort of root cause here is thin liquidity of a token.
Yeah, of course, because I'm sure anyone could do anyone could kind of like short on the way out. Like that actually happened in THORChain. Well, I don't know if it happened. There's rumors. Someone opened up a big short after, round Rune's bottom price, and rumor has it was TCB or THORChain Bull or whatever it used to be called at, who was a big, one of the biggest whales on the network, who did a lot of good stuff, and then at some point he publicly exited and he sold all his stuff, and rumor was that he shorted on the way out. So it could have been, but the thing is, like, that obviously goes into calculations as far as like, can you successfully short on the way out? And because I feel like shorting and long, like betting, especially like in DeFi, is one of those ways that I think destroys a lot of economic security models because therefore you're supposed to, like, if you ruin the network, you lose all your stuff. But what happens if you bet to profit on ruining the network, and then you just lose everything but gain so much more, and then you just open season on blasting a hole in all these networks,
Right. Yeah, no, that's a really great point. It's something we talk about a lot internally. A token getting added to a lending market as like a borrowable asset upgrades all of the possible attack vectors from low level or medium level to high level, because there's a profit motive now to sync the protocol or attack it in some way. So protocols need to be like really careful about getting added to lending markets. They're often thinking like, oh, well, this is great. We're listed in more places. We have more utility. It's a supply sync, whatever. It's like, well, hold on. Like, there's some second order effects of this. I hope someone profited off THORChain going down, because their addition of savers and lending was terrible. I think we might have talked about this a while ago, but those programs were like inherently not secure. The original THORChain design I thought was good enough, but the economic experiments that the founders were pushing were not great.
Yeah, and in the long term, it sort of ends up being like, it's almost like they didn't have to do it if they had streaming swaps from the beginning, because then they would have had deep enough pools, everything would have worked out. So they had to make this weird deal with the devil to get extra liquidity, but then they should have ended the deal. I never thought of those. I didn't understand like the lending completely. I understand kind of. I thought it sounded like it worked, but it turns out it didn't. Savers I did understand well. I just thought the risk was significantly better contained than it was. I thought, well, you cap it this much, so even if the price, the risk falls on the pool holders, but still, like, they make enough money, and it's not going to blow up the whole thing. I think it's more synths and savers together, and then the lending just put this big thing where it just became, it was always a gamble, but this was like too big of a gamble kind of thing.
Yeah, could see that. Yeah, not to criticize, like, don't speak ill of the dead kind of thing. Not that THORChain's completely dead. This is again one of the reasons I like Maya protocol. It's like it's more simple. It stuck with the original design, and yeah.
Well, that's the cool thing. And I've covered THORChain like 3 or 4 of these live shows in the last
couple months.
But it's everything about THORChain is becoming Maya-esque because Alux is actually sort of designing the recovery as far as things. Like they're doing the TCY, which is like the Maya token, the profit share token. I think they got rid of all block reward emissions. Like that's gone now. They're just making everything much more simple, much better like that, and still doing numbers as far as volume's concerned. So
yeah.
Some of it's from Bybit, but whatever.
Which I'm a fan of, but yeah, I think I'm glad we don't have to talk too much about THORChain. It's kind of yesterday's news, but yeah, we haven't gotten to talk about like the 1.5 million ETH to BTC trades that went through. I'm sure you spoke about that on previous episodes.
Yeah, I actually have a post about this today because I'm actually gonna like advance that up. My freaking notes for this show has just been all over the place because I've just kept on shuffling around based on what we're talking about. But
sorry about that.
So here we go. No,
it's
necessary. So Zach XBT, a lot of people know that guy. He's a researcher who does a lot of like tracing of hacked funds. He basically was talking smack about like how a lot of the THORChain volume comes from theft and stuff like that. And then he said, he made this interesting point right here. This is today. It says, your data is not truly private if you're using a centralized front end to interact with THORChain. Yeah, that's also true. But he says, is self-custody worth waiting additional hours and paying a higher fee for large swaps? Self-custody is important, yes, but if the entire process is overall less efficient, then the answer would be no for normal users. And I had a response to that basically saying, I don't agree. Like, self-custody is worth it for it's not like, well, if it's the most convenient option, it's the best. It's like, if you don't want to get freaking rugged.
Use the database. Use Solana.
Yes. Yeah, the funny thing about this, though, also is for people like us, we care about decentralization. We trust money that we can't be rugged from. But also, I know a lot of people in developing countries, refugees, like on a personal level, people like that, as well as some of the weirder, more spicy people out there who just get debanked all the time for random things. There's like the ability for permissionless networks is massively valuable. And the idea of like, well, you might get poor price as execution is the most disgustingly privileged first world take you could have.
Yeah.
It's just like, come on, like your system works for you right now. Like, I have nothing to hide. It's those same people. It's like, oh yeah, you've never been in like a terrible regime. When my parents became politically active in Mexico, people literally told them, if you did this 5 years earlier, your heads would be on the side of the road, literally. Like, you picked the right time to not get murdered for this. And we've known of people. I knew a kind of like a volunteer lawyer, self-taught lawyer, who was like a protector of the people, who also later got murdered because of this stuff. Like, this is real for people. No privacy, not something to hide. It's like bullshit. So no offense to Zach, because the thing is, he does do good work. That's the thing, is like, I can't be like, oh, this guy sucks. No, he's great, but he's just super wrong on that thing. And so I think it's kind of like going back to the dark net market adoption type thing.
Yeah.
I think you should see some kind of darknet usage for anything like real, anything.
For sure.
But if it's only that, it's kind of a honeypot, sort of, you know?
Yeah.
So it's just like you can't have something that's useful that like no one, like everything is perfectly like above board, because it's kind of a litmus test of how useful this thing is. Because if THORChain if there's no hacked money that ever goes through there, and it's not even laundering because you just see it on the other end. It's from transparent.
Yeah, it's completely transparent. So like the claims that it's money laundering are really fucking annoying.
Yeah, so I just think that like governments, state level actors, things like that will come hard and after these things and test them. And no one in crypto should be like everyone should be on the same team on this, at least, even if you're like, wow, you know, it's not as efficient as centralized stuff, or, well, I wish hackers didn't use this. I don't think anyone in crypto should be like making a big point about talking about that when we should be like, dude, the real attacks are going to come. We want this to be as censorship resistant as possible. And if the awful hacker people are using it for that, yeah, that's a sign that it's working as intended, kind of.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed. I was happy to see they didn't compromise their credible neutrality over this like trade.
Yeah, they almost did. The lead developer and the biggest investor left. Like they just like, I don't want to touch this. And the network voted to pause Ethereum during the whole stuff, and it did temporarily pause, but then it got overridden by more nodes. So like there was a conflict over this, you know, where I think something like Maya, like again, because the Mayan team is like mostly Mexican, they understand this a lot better, and they wouldn't. But you know, the THORChain team kind of the ecosystem kind of had to deal with like, oh, are we going to LARP or are we going to do this for real? And they settled on for real. So there you go.
Yeah, no, it was good to see that. I mean, there were even people talking about Ethereum forking over this, which was really sad
precedent.
To see, but at the same
There's
time,
precedent.
Yeah, exactly. Like there is precedent, but it's like there can't be precedent. Like this, that is kind of written off, I think, for everybody now. Like if they had forked over the Tornado Cash thing, I probably would have ended up leaving Ethereum because it would have been the second time that they had forked over a hack and compromised their credible neutrality. The DAO was early enough and it's been long enough that like the longer Ethereum doesn't fork over something big like this, the more credible their credible neutrality claims to credible neutrality are.
Yes, and I do think, in my opinion, this is just an opinion, like I could be very wrong on this. I do think the DAO hack should have just been allowed to happen. I think that, and not just from a righteous point of view, I mean, give a crap from that, but like from a, you know, I do, but from a long-term health and capitalization of ETH, I think ETH Classic was such a thorn in their side for so long. All the maxis and all the stuff they had to deal with because they did that, I think hurt their money more than just losing a bunch of money in a hack one time.
Maybe
it's hard to tell. Again, it's hard to tell,
yeah.
but I think that was like not good.
For sure, like if you look at them, let's say if you're measuring it by the market cap of ETH, I think that would be the case. But in dollars, but the people that were pulling to reorg the blockchain, like people who had lost money in that, especially the people that had lost a lot of money, were the decision makers. And it comes down to just being, it was even more centralized then. It's still kind of centralized now, but it's not as centralized as Bitcoin, for example, where Core runs everything. So ETH is one of the more decentralized protocols, even in terms of like the dev team. I'd say Monero is maybe up there at the top, but God knows, you know, like who knows, like how many of those people are the same agency? Like we don't really know. So anyway, not to digress too far.
Yeah, obviously. And that's the thing, all these things could go a million different directions for forever and ever. But speaking of permissionless finance, maybe it's time to highlight our good old buddy Ross Yu and his thing. So, and I almost like this almost sounded like a troll, but it's like true, right? He said, I've been trying to auction some personal belongings. eBay wants to verify my ID. I provided all docs a week ago and still nothing. I've talked to several eBay reps and they keep being put off. Today's the last day to start the auction before I leave town. Do you know someone who can help? And I think it's so funny because, like, first off, realistically, his ID probably has a lot of, like, you know, capsaicin on it, so to speak. It's probably spicy as hell. Like, this international hitman, kingpin, whatever crap they like lied about for him. It's just
Right.
like, just because he's pardoned doesn't mean he's like, oh yeah, it's fine. Oh yeah. Like, do you think the local bank manager or whatever is going to look at his ID and then just be like, oh, all these huge flags are going off in our KYC database, but I know I saw the story of Trump pardoning me. He's cool now. Like, that's not how it works. It's just the
Right.
system gets messed up. And so,
Yeah.
but it's just so funny. He's trying to like open bazaar it kind of, and
Yeah.
it's just like perfect. It's so
A name I haven't heard in a long time.
another name I haven't heard in a long time. But
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it says my answer to that was I have a great idea, an unrestricted
Yeah.
unrestricted eBay style website. You can use crypto to buy and sell anything you want, no ID. Anyone ever thought to work on something like this? And
Dude.
it's funny because some people thought it was funny, some people thought it was too soon, and a lot of people either missed the point entirely. It was like, well, yeah, look at this, or just didn't care and wanted to shell. But it was kind of funny. And then Ross did quote his own tweet later and say, I was just told eBay is aware of this, but is choosing not to do anything about it. First time I've ever felt discriminated against since going free. Gee, maybe I should start my own e-commerce website. What'll I call it? So at least,
Oh my God.
at least he's in on the joke. Is the point?
Yeah,
Like,
that's great. That's great. Dude, we joked about this like last year before it was clear that he was going to get out or that Trump was going to get in and have that promise. And someone was like, what if he got out and just launched the whole thing on decentralized crypto rails? Like, did the whole thing on the IPFS with censorship resistant escrow agent and like, website, front end website incentives. And that's what I was commenting underneath yours. Pin dependent is a mechanism that we've created, and then Unicro is a good friend's project. And combining these two would give you an uncensorable website where you're not actually the escrow agent. It's a smart contract and any number of people that are signing off on the transaction and delivery of goods and things like that.
Yeah. I'm finding the comment that you did. Yeah, okay. I'll just throw that up on the screen because why not? But yeah, it's kind of interesting how like this whole like censorship resistant commerce is super important. And I do think there's this, I mean, depending on like how long you want to spend on that, I do think there's some interesting stuff that can be done. There's an inherent problem with like marketplaces and social sites where they're either centralized or centralized enough to where enough of the front ends are centralized, enough of the data, etc., so that it doesn't really matter if it's decentralized, or they're just like a decentralized hellscape of just spam and porn and horrible things like that, just all over the place. And I have some ideas, but I don't quite know the right balance. Like, how do you get it to where this is neutral infrastructure, but people don't have to be exposed to or on their actual websites that they build or whatever interfaces they build actually show like wildly illegal, horrible things? Do you have a Goldilocks, whatever, just right type thing on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think yes. I think user configurable front ends to filter out certain words or like only filter for certain words is probably the way to go. At the end of the day, you can't stop people from transacting and buying and selling things. So like the red markets will always exist. And like, if we're being realistic, governments are behind most of that anyway. So they're just mad that they weren't getting their cut or running the deals. So that's, yeah, I mean, but I do think there are a few elements here of like, I think the question is maybe like, what would a decentralized Silk Road look like? And the answer is something like uncensorable front end, which you can host on the IPFS. You can use Filecoin's virtual machine, which is an EVM, to pay people for hosting a website we created a mechanism where you can pay people from the real yield of the protocol, or in this case, like the website, to host the front end. We called it pin dependent. We put out an MVP at an ETH Global Hackathon, and we're pioneering it in our upcoming launchpad, which I will refrain from talking about here, but if anyone's interested, like, message me. And then the other mechanism would be like user configuration. Well, no, you need an escrow agent. So Unicro, it's on Twitter, Unicro.io. It's Alice and Bob want to transact. They appoint Charlie as a trusted third party between them and
don't
nobody
say
else.
Charlie, because it's been Charlie Shrem before and he rugged us.
Yeah, let's go.
Johnny.
Skip to David. Yeah, Charlie Shrem sucks. Yeah, so no Charlies. But Unicro is a really great escrow primitive, 800 lines of code, fantastic integration for any smart contract. Like if someone's building an Upwork out there, or like an Uber or an Airbnb, or any kind of like one of these like gig economy apps, or like decentralized, pseudo decentralized marketplaces, like building a actually decentralized version, use Unicro. And then the third point would be like user configurability of the front end. So most people don't want to be confronted with like all of the truly terrible black market stuff that's like out there. But if you were filtering for certain things, you could have like a filter on the front end that would look at the all of the listings that have been posted, and then have them curated for you. So I think end user configurability is an important component of this, and I would love if Ross wanted to launch this thing. That'd be sick. If he does, if Ross, if you're watching this, just reach out to Token Dynamics. We would love to help you. But yeah, I think that's how you would build a Silk Road in today's day and age. And the nice thing is someone's going to do it. Like someone's eventually going to do this, and it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, it should, in my personal opinion, should not be Ross. I think he's had enough spice for a whole lifetime right there.
I wouldn't do it if I were Ross either.
I want him, because he did write some like interesting like DAO and things like that kind of things while he was still in prison. So he's still thinking
design
about
ideas. Really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I want him to, of course, still be involved with things and still be effective and all this stuff, but just like stay away from like the selling spicy things kind of part of it. Like you don't need to be that guy again, but like,
right.
Imagine what I would love is for us to have, by the time his life is over, have a legacy that is greater than what's behind him. Like as far as what's ahead of him. Like wouldn't it be cool if he was known as the guy who did XYZ cool thing, and then it's like footnote. He was also did. It's kind of like
Nelson Mandela going to prison and then becoming president, kind of thing.
Yeah, sort of. I mean, or you could say something like Amir Taki being first 5 Bitcoin developers,
that's
and
a
then
perfect example.
Maybe being a freedom fighter eclipse that, or maybe you could say the DarkFi stuff today might and it's too early to tell, but it might be one of those things that's bigger than his past, or people are like, the DarkFi guy used to XYZ. You're like, oh no.
Yeah, that's a perfect example. I use Amir as an example of people doing cool stuff that have like an interesting history. When I talk about like the really cool stuff that's going on in crypto, I'm like, yeah, and then there's this thing over here, especially when talking to the libertarian crowd, that a lot of your viewers are going to know this, but Amir was the creator of a privacy-focused Bitcoin wallet with Cody Wilson, the creator of Ghost Guns.
Yeah, I forgot about that for a second, but now I remember.
Yeah. So that's like a cool part of his history. I could see Ross doing something like that, but I mean, personally, I hope to see Ross like posting about how awesome it is being free for a while, and then maybe he goes on Rogan in like 2 years. But I hope he gets like all of the like good normal person experiences, and like starts family and like all of this kind of stuff for the next couple of years. I hope he takes as much time as he could possibly want. I'm sure he will.
Yeah, and of course I've been, reached out to his mom and all that, congratulating, and obviously offering. He can be on this show anytime he wants, but also I'm just not going to push him for it at all because he doesn't need to do anything for the rest of his life that he doesn't want to.
No. Yeah, he's totally good. He's free and clear, man.
Yeah, he's free and clear. He did enough. He kickstarted the whole crypto movement into something real. Now he's out. He's got his plant. He's got monies and hoes, and so like he's doing fine. Like no disrespect meant, by the way, but like he's like I'm saying he's doing fine. He could be retired for the rest of his life if he wanted to, and he's going like a baller to the inauguration and everything. Like I'm like almost want him to become. Part of me wants him to be like I'm two minds. The one mind is I want him to do well, period. But the two minds is on the one hand I want him to be like, like Gandalf the White and like come back and like do way more than he did before, kind of cool stuff.
For sure.
On the other side, I want him to just never touch crypto again, really, and just be gaudy, balling out of control, kind of like Jeff Bezos is now. As far as like getting the chest hair out, having like being on a beach somewhere, like all that with just money and a cigar and glasses, just pick your road, Ross. Either way, I support you all the way.
I would support Ross whatever he wants to do, but I think he's probably going to go the more low-key route based on everything he's been posting. I hope to surf with him, so this is like the sort of third path. I hope he just like gets to travel around and enjoy everything a lot. But it would be cool if he was like actively participating in the space. I'd be a little wary of like, it's a steep learning curve. Like the talking about like the world has evolved a lot since he went in. Like crypto has evolved 10 times more, and like it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Like it's a lot of rugs, out there. I don't know if you remember or saw this, but I think somebody managing his like meme coin or something like that lost like $10 million or something. That was rough. So want to make sure that Ross gets not caught up in those kind of things. So on the one hand, I hope he's like an active participant in the space. We need more cypherpunks. On the other hand, I want to protect his wallet balance.
Yeah, it could definitely get pretty bad from there. But like the space has evolved considerably, but also I think the rugs have always been with us. Like I can't remember a time when there wasn't like a lot of rugs in the space. Bitcoin is obviously the first one that you could say is like not a rug, but it was the first one. Then Namecoin was fine, and then you get to like just totally crazy stuff. Like then you get to, do you remember Aurora Coin from back in the day?
Yeah.
Actually,
didn't that get bought and turned into something else?
I haven't checked in on it lately, but I had some at one point because I knew the people involved with it. Some kind of interesting stuff. But like the anonymous founder, like airdropped a whole bunch of money. And
that was to everyone in Iceland?
Yes. And it pumped and then dumped, and someone could say that was a weird little exit scam thing. Like maybe he airdropped it and then he sold it first or something. Who knows? There's that. Then there's Monero's so Bytecoin was known to be a scam, sort of. And I haven't looked into it too much. The Monero like founder, whoever, I forget his pseudo, but the community generally agrees that he was a scammer kind of thing, even though like since then it's become it just like
that's top tier lore.
There's some other like the 2014 era coins, which or before even, that were made unnamed, that I heard through the grapevine the founder intentionally built in like bugs to be able to mine more at the start, and like like a stealth pre-mine kind of thing, like because Decred had a pre-mine, like a literal pre-mine, but it was like 5% or something. It was above board. You could not like it, but it's still like it was above board. But there's a lot of not above board ones. They're just constant rugging everywhere, right? And then now there's still a lot of rugging, but I feel like it's a lot easier to not get rugged today. You know.
Yeah. I mean, well, I would say, like, to push back on that a little bit,
Okay,
it's
good.
easy
Go
to not
for
get
it.
rugged if you've been around for 10, 11, 12 years. And if you're, I mean, if you've been around for a while, like, it's not as hard to avoid getting rugged. Maybe it's just selection bias. The people that don't get rugged stick around for longer, or something like that. I'm like speaking, just from my own experience. But yeah, I mean, with the pre-mine thing, this is a little bit of a tangent, but as we've been thinking about this launch pad and thinking about like what it's a fair launch pad, it's fully censorship resistant. So we built that primitive into it with the hosting of the front ends through incentives. And then we have like an auction mechanism that promotes price discovery. We've been thinking about like, well, what kind of parameters should we allow teams to have? What percentage of tokens is like a fair launch? What even is a fair launch? Fair is a loaded term. It's different for everybody. That's why everybody says now that we're in this stage of the market.
No billionaires or millionaires. That's fair.
Yeah, right. That's a good impression. That's a good brain impression.
He lives not super far from where I live, like a few couple hours. So.
Nice. Yeah, you got to egg his house. So, just kidding. Don't condone property destruction and violence. You got to put a prediction market on whether someone will egg his house and then bet no. Okay. So, let's see. What were we talking about?
I don't know, but we could talk about Hyperliquid.
Pre-mines. We can talk about Hyperliquid. I was just going to say.
Oh, yeah. Fair launch.
Satoshi pre-mined 5% of the Bitcoin, and it was a lot freaking higher than 5% at the time. So I don't want to hear it from Bitcoiners about pre-mines.
Listen, I said that, and people got pissed.
They get mad. They try to cancel you. They're weak, and they don't like truth.
That's all of which is true. Yeah, just the last thought on the pre-mine. I think what makes people like Bitcoin's thing is because it did get mined kind of from zero, and fairly, but the information asymmetry was the unfair part. Whereas with other mines, there might have been more sketchier, weirder things, but everyone knew what a mine was then. And I don't know, just the ultimate pre-miner, I guess, is to have your community go almost to zero, and then like the founder dumps, and then you resurrect it from the ashes. So like, for example, that sort of happened with Bitcoin. It didn't go to zero, but like the founder's probably dead. So like that doesn't matter. Yeah. Or you have like Charlie Lee dump at the top for Litecoin, and then he has some money. That was
incredible.
Yes.
That was masterclass.
I'm not going to say too much more on that because I'm trying to be nice with the Litecoin people these days. And even though I like the Litecoiners, I don't really like Charlie. There's a distinction. But the point there was that. So then he's not in there anymore. Then the Steam community, where when Hive forked away, then it just like came from nothing kind of thing. So those kinds of things, or like you could also argue something like Zcash, which had like the founder's reward for a while, and then it still might have some distribution problems, but just because of how it's bottomed so much in price, that I'm sure that like that tends to like change the distribution, where like old bag holders sell, and then new people get in, and then by the time it goes up again, it's much more distributed. And so Ethereum, unfortunately, had the benefit of having a very successful ICO, and up until maybe right now, or like up until like a year ago, maybe, was like extremely successful as far as like everything, the ecosystem's booming, the price is going up. So you never had that like everyone dumps their coins because they think it's dead kind of rebirth moment. So
yeah. Yes, generally agreed. I like projects resurrecting too. So do you want to talk about Hyperliquid?
Absolutely. Where do we go? Here we go. So I just shared this post here that has like the Trojan horse of like DEX with centralized systems inside. Like the quote DEX wrappers is a Trojan horse is kind of the idea.
Right.
And the post from Jose V says Hyperliquid was on the verge of taking a $200 million hit, but as a self-proclaimed decentralized exchange, they reversed on-chain data to fix it. It's fine to be a SEX, but don't masquerade as a DEX when you haven't done the hard work. So that's this person's perspective. Would you mind giving a quick recap of the entire situation here? I've only seen like random things. I just know there was some drama going on, but like I didn't really poke super deep into that.
Sure. Yeah, I'll give some context as well. So there have actually been 2 events. I think there's going to be at least 1 or 2 more because of the nature of the second event. Mm-hmm. But Hyperliquid is a perp market, so perpetual futures market. It's a derivative market. You can bet on the price of something to go up or down, and you can go long or short with a lot of leverage. And there are vulnerabilities that open up there when the risk parameters are not managed properly. So if there is more betting volume, there's more bets than the underlying spot liquidity, then people can manipulate the spot price and then bet on the perp price and make off with all of the money from the perp DEX and then let the price reset on the spot and they come out net positive. That's what happened in the second vulnerability. But the one that Jose was talking about there was the ETH vulnerability. So someone went 50x long Ethereum, and then they, instead of closing out their position, which would have required them to take profit against the other people betting, they just withdrew their margin and allowed themselves to get liquidated. And in doing that, it was the kind of the flaw of Hyperliquid's design. It could have been a calculated flaw. I actually think Hyperliquid might have designed this intentionally, knowing that some things like this would happen, and I think that's a good risk management strategy. Like, the goal should not be 0 incidents, like economic vulnerability incidents. The goal should be maximize profit. And if in the process you like have some spicy things that go on like this that generate a lot of negative PR, so be it, as long as you're making money overall. That's kind of that's Token Dynamics risk management philosophy. Other people feel differently. But so Hyperliquid was able to, through this series, in both of these, well, in the first, they ate a loss by taking the other side. They were like the counterparty to the trade. So Hyperliquid is their own exchange's market maker, and someone basically figured this out and figured out that Hyperliquid would cover losses if they made like egregious gains. That Hyperliquid would be like the counterparty of last resort. And so someone made a huge trade. It was for like $400 million of ETH, and then exited in a way that caused Hyperliquid to take the other side of the bet. A week or 2 later, Hyperliquid had listed this relatively illiquid asset, Jelly, that had a lot of
it's a jelly. It's not a liquid.
Held by whales. Yeah, Jelly is somewhat solid. There's a good riff there.
Of course.
I hope to see that on Rekt News, REKT. They keep track of a lot of the biggest, highest profile exploits, but that's funny. Like, Jelly wasn't fully liquid. Jelly isn't fully liquid. That's good.
The jokes write themselves. You don't have, like, my job here is easy.
I should bring you on to do our marketing. So Jelly was this relatively illiquid coin, and one of the whales manipulated the price, dumped it, and then took a long position and bought it back up. He figured out that if he withdrew the margin the way that the original exploiter did in the first incident with ETH, he could lock in those profits without affecting the Jelly price. So the difference between a perp DEX and spot is perp DEX is like counting on that on average there will be enough interest charged on a position that it's unprofitable over the long term for people to make And so they can take the other side of that. And Hyperliquid has an entire risk engine to do these kinds of calculations. But at the end of the day, like, they're the counterparty. They're the people taking the short position when someone takes a long position, if there is not an equal amount of people betting long and short. And so in this case, the jelly whale took a huge long position and then withdrew their margin, forced a liquidation, and made off with their unrealized P&L. And the sort of the root causes here, it's interesting to me that they designed it in a way that someone could withdraw margin, because this was like one of the first high-profile economic vulnerabilities. Was perp DEX, Mango Markets allowed trading against unrealized gains. So you could use your unrealized gains as collateral. Someone manipulated the underlying price, borrowed $118 million against from the Treasury, and then against its inflated collateral, and then didn't pay back that debt when the price snapped from like $1 billion token back down to $13 token for the Mango token. So generally, like, this is an old template sort of for like economic vulnerabilities. I'm surprised that Hyperliquid had it in their decks, but it's a risk vector. So that's kind of what happened with Hyperliquid, and I think there are probably more vectors, vulnerability vectors, for well-capitalized attackers to take advantage of long-tail illiquid assets on Hyperliquid.
Well, I guess that's the real culprit. Maybe is the illiquidity. You know?
Yeah, relative illiquidity for sure. Yes, and so with these protocols, like, they have to do a lot of risk management, due diligence around like modeling liquidity depth and like the effects of liquidations or the effects of like macro shocks that would affect the assets that they've listed. So there are a lot of calculations that they have to do, and Hyperliquid does that in a centralized way because their team is running the risk engine. But I think Jose's point was they're not actually decentralized. They just run their own validators. Like, it's not a decentralized thing. They say they're going to decentralize. This concept is like progressive decentralization.
Famous last words.
Yeah, very few protocols actually get around to like progressively decentralizing, and it's going to be really hard for Hyperliquid to maintain their edge, which is they're catered toward high frequency trading, but like in a sort of decentralized way. It's like they're kind of just interoperable with other EVMs. It's not that they're like decentralized, and they would be if they had many different validators that were not the same person in a room, like running multiple computers, but they don't. So they're not very decentralized either.
Yeah, and the whole progressive decentralization thing is kind of interesting because I have seen it happen a few ways. Every project at its origin, like, but Satoshi's running everything on Bitcoin, kind of. It's kind of sketch, and then as it gets bigger, it gets better. But then even structurally, like, obviously in the early like THORChain days, the Chaos Net, etc., there was a lot of stuff that they could do. After that, stuff was a lot more like uncapped and permissionless, but they still had the Mimir, whatever they called it, to stop trading, like the admin key. And then when JP used that, like, flooded the whole network, then they got rid of it in the next updates. Now they don't have it. Now it's only by node vote can they do that.
Right.
And so, like, there are these cases of like the training wheels getting stripped away over time and things like that. I do also like kind of the way Zcash has gone a little bit. And Zcash is obviously a work in progress in this case. But like in the beginning, it was, you have the Zcash Electric Coin Company, or now known as ECC, kind of like just doing everything. And then you had the Founders Reward, which just went to certain people, and there you go. And after that ran out, they created like the Dev Fund, which, like, I think it was like 7% to ECC and 13% to the foundation, which I guess was created in the meantime, and the foundation administered some smaller grants and things like that. Then now I believe they're like first of all, the founder Zuko, he left ECC, so he's no longer like the figurehead of Zcash, even though he's still involved in the ecosystem. And then you have a whole bunch of other changes, such as they're working on coin holder voting. They're working on getting rid of like the dev fund and making, I don't even exactly know what they're going to do next, but they're basically turning more into like a DAO and stuff. So they're like under Josh Swire, who runs ECC now. They're kind of going to a much more aggressive decentralization route kind of thing. And so they started from like a permissionless at the one level, but kind of run by a company with money going towards them. They're starting to turn out into like more of like a real ecosystem. And so you do see examples of that happen. And you see examples like Ethereum where like Vitalik puts his finger back on the scale recently and kind of like goes the wrong way, you know? And yeah, it's interesting to see. And like, I would say Litecoin is another good example because Charlie kind of like ran it. I mean, again, this is not a technical argument at all, but basically after he dumped, he's still around, he's still fun stuff, but he's sort of exited, and mostly the Litecoin community is just done doing its own thing now. Like they implemented MWeb, they've been kind of doing a bunch of other partnerships. The foundation, I actually know the foundation people, and there's like not many and not much money, and they're just scrappily hanging around. And you could say Monero's another good example in that Fluffy Pony kind of ran a lot of stuff, including infrastructure. He's still skulking around, but he's sort of out. But then there's there's other people, other devs, there's donations, there's, and then Bitcoin Cash was sort of Roger and Bitcoin.com kind of ran a lot of it, even though Amari Sachet and the ABC team kind of was the dev team. They got chased out. Roger and Bitcoin.com sort of like drifted to become less BCH focused, and now it's like 4 different protocol teams that are kind of doing their own thing, running the whole thing. So like over time, you see a lot of examples of decentralization, progressive decentralization. Sometimes it goes the opposite way, but if the structural centralization problems are really hard to get out because someone's running the show, and then someone has to say we're not running the show anymore, and that's hard to do.
Yeah, for sure. It's hard to get people to voluntarily like diminish their power. It's like one of the oldest governance problems there is. So with these old school coins, like going more like Zcash, going to more maybe trying to do like DAO style governance, I hope they get it right. I hope they don't try to do DAOs the way that everybody else has tried to do DAOs. I'm pretty bearish on governance. I thought Nakamoto consensus, like a binding Nakamoto consensus model, would be really good. We saw that didn't really work with Bitcoin Cash. They're, I don't know, unsolved problem. But yeah, some protocols do progressively decentralize. I think a good example might be Compound, where the founder, Compound is the second largest lending market on Ethereum. I don't think it's the largest by asset volume, but large lending market. The founder stepped down a few years ago. It's currently there is they're warring factions vying for control of Compound. And so there, is some degree of decentralization there just by nature of like the politics and the competition in the community.
Yeah, it is kind of crazy to see all these different examples of people trying these different things. Governance being an unsolved problem, I think it's like an imperfectly solved problem. Like I think there's a bunch of tools and they all have their drawbacks, and we haven't found the one best solution. But also one thing I've become, which as a like tech first kind of a guy, does suck to kind of have to admit, but tech is only a very small part of this whole thing. It's just whether your project succeeds or not has a lot to do with who's involved in like strong leadership and stuff. And it's obviously something, at the scale of like Bitcoin keeps moving forward because there's just so many people involved. But even though obviously that's a different story about how it's moving forward. But
Yeah.
I think that like a DAO can be like a classic DAO can be a fantastic tool, but depending on the makeup of who's the whale, who's the shows leadership, and how well do they do the politicking, it could really not turn out well. Same thing with like Nakamoto consensus, and that's something that I think the Bitcoin Cash community is kind of arguing on right now. Is they seem to say Nakamoto consensus does work, and we're living proof of that, meaning that we got the right protocol at the end. We got rid of all the bad actors and people like that. Now it's just growth season, baby. We feel perfectly decentralized. We're working on cool shit. Like, that's kind of the, and I think it's definitely too early to put a stamp. I don't fully agree with that point of view, but I think it's too early to be able to say it was or not. And the next big, it's interesting because they do seem to be very aligned on scripting and smart contracts based on UTXOs. And that's their big thing they're focusing on. One thing that's kind of interesting is there are some people who are trying to, because of this, make changes to do instant confirmations of some kind, like some sort of a pre-consensus type thing. And part of the religious tenets of that ecosystem, one of them is zero conf works for everything. And who knows if there's going to be another split or something over that issue. Again, I'm just looking on the horizon because I know that, like, for example, a DAO vote is a good way of resolving these issues without a split. And I guess we'll see. But a lot of what makes this community succeed or not, like, I don't think Monero is perfect. I do think it has a very good sort of a track record of how you can kind of run a Bitcoin style Nakamoto consensus proof of work currency. As far as, I don't know if there's massive mining centralization anywhere. There might have been at one point with the A6, but then now it has time to like recoup. And then as far as like now the figurehead is gone, you know, they've managed to self-fund. The development decisions seem to be, you know, everything seems to be sort of working out a little bit. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, Bitcoin Cash, I think, is a long tail failed experiment mostly. I don't take too much that goes on over there very seriously anymore. I've seen a couple really cool mechanisms like 4 years ago that came out from that community, but generally I don't think they're doing much. I think it's just kind of a, you know, I feel this way about most of the old coins. Monero, my impression was always that they couldn't fork because of the privacy, the way that ring signatures would be like doxed if you reused your private key across forks. And I wonder, you know, as we're talking about it, how full chain membership proofs might change that game theory. I don't know if that would work the same way. I think full chain membership proofs would make it possible to fork without compromising the anonymity set, but I don't know.
Yes, my understanding is it would work the same way, but because it's a global membership proof, right? It's like a full chain membership proof. Then it would, like, instead of like everyone in the network, it's now two people in the network. You kind of like rule out a little bit, but like it's the anon set is still so huge. Now it doesn't matter. And it's kind of interesting because first of all, there was a time when there were NFTs on Monero. I forget what they called them, Mordinals or something. And the Mordinals
original.
Yes. They were a big privacy problem because, you know, by making non-fungible
that's a psyop.
Things.
I mean, they said that about the Bitcoin ordinals as well, but like how much worse for Monero?
Yeah, not only was there that, but at the time when they changed the proof of work algo to smash the ASICs, there was several Monero forks, like 4 splits right there. And then there was Wow Nero. I don't know if Wow Nero is a fork, like a chain fork, or if it's just a new, you know, a completely new thing. But there was a few things like that, and people, when they claimed their airdropped coins or whatever, they just like whacked down the anon set, and it was really bad. So I guess with Monero you can always hard fork, but it does hurt some things, but it will hurt less after that. But I guess because of the simplicity of the design, where you have like tail emission plus adaptive block size, and then you just send and receive with privacy. The amounts of like fights over this, I'm sure there will be in the future, but it's just limited, right? It just, you kind of got the model really basically figured out. And the only thing that you haven't figured out really is what privacy model are you going to use at that time, and you're constantly upgrading. So like, for example, before 2017, I don't think Monero had confidential transactions at all. I think it had like transparent transactions, but with ring signatures. And in 2017 with ring CT, then they added that in. So the privacy model of Monero has significantly changed like every couple of years or so. And so as long that's the thing no one's going to disagree on, that you got to keep upgrading. It just, and everything else seems kind of like there's not a lot to fight about really. So maybe because of the way they structured it, it might just have fewer fights.
Yeah, I always wonder what the nature of the debate is in Monero. I don't keep close tabs on what's going on with the developers. I figure like, I mean, I could see, I would be super interested in someone's analysis of like how well does the Monero community debate, and like how cohesive is it, and like why is it the way that it is? Because, you know, if you're thinking about like the how Bitcoin was subverted, like you've got Roger's book in the background. Let's plug that. Hijacking Bitcoin, phenomenal. Goes into step by step exactly how Bitcoin was taken over by Core. This is the unspoken, rarely cited history of the big blockers, or like the block size debates, the block wars. I wonder what similar kind of tactics various agencies might be using to infiltrate Monero. And I also wonder if they're doing that at all because it might just be so beneficial for them to have something like Monero exist. Like the CIA is always going to need anonymous money to launder drugs and cash.
Well, I do have a few thoughts on that. Let me say something. There are some concerns that there's something going on internally in the Zcash world for this kind to like that could be malicious, and I'm just going to be vague about that for now. But as far as Monero is concerned, a few things are clear. Now, this isn't like, so first of all, like a few things are convenient, I should say. First of all, you have a privacy model, which was one of the, I don't think it was even the best for its time, but by the time you start adding in CT and some other stuff like that, then all of a sudden it becomes actually really good. But also it was like the best that could be done at the time, sort of before ZK stuff. Because of the recent attacks that don't even like CoinJoin doesn't have those, and that's like the oldest privacy technique kind of. CoinJoin doesn't have those vulnerabilities, right? It's just a lot easier to just not have those structural permanent vulnerabilities. It's been known for 3.5 years by Rucknium, who was a pro Monero researcher who figured this stuff out. And it was known for 3.5 years, and it's at least another year, if not 2, before full chain membership. So you have a massive amount of time where this is a vulnerability. You could maybe say intelligence agencies, if they cared, would have known earlier. So there's a massive amount of Monero transaction history that could be de-anonymized even before quantum computers. For example, you have a community that is extremely focused on, at least in markets heavily about the dark net and criminal type things up to this day, like tax evasion, Monero, like that kind of stuff, like very clear on this stuff, creating kind of like a honeypot. Especially when you start to celebrate delistings from major exchanges and actually not want to implement technology that would allow, like Zcash and Furo, for example, have done, that would allow you to be listed on some of these European exchanges and stuff. It further concentrates this honeypot of as many criminals as possible into a privacy model that is known to have a vulnerability where the average person buying coffee is probably fine, but if you're doing crime, I think you could figure out which transactions are which way. And also, So the Monero community is extremely hostile and like almost like toxic and almost like terrorist in some ways towards the Dash community from 2014 to 2017, especially, to where they showed up at Dash meetups and literally handed out flyers in person saying Dash is a scam, you should sell it all. Like a bunch of weird, really aggressive things. Because before Ring CT got implemented, it could be arguable that Dash had better privacy. And it's like you're trying to attack the next competitor. Now, Occam's razor says it's just because you're trying to get ahead. But who knows what else. And then when Zcash came out, oh my gosh, did they go after Zcash. Like just horrendously everywhere. Because, again, it has good privacy. So maybe it's trying to take a known privacy model that could be that, you know, exploiters could know their way around and funnel as many people into that as possible, as many anarcho-libertarians as well as criminals into this one honeypot. So it's like a massive conspiracy theory at that point. I don't know how much of I believe that that's actually true. It's just could be. Zcash, you could say, well, because of the transparent stuff, it makes the Anon sets, even though it's space age technology, it's really good. It makes it easy enough to figure out who's coming in and out, and if you know, and some other random stuff. You could argue that Zcash then could have a honeypotted effect. I definitely think that intelligence agencies or other people have some kind of a presence in both. At least they're at least there. They understand the tech. They're at least snooping via some malicious nodes or some presence on darknet markets, or they're at least there. How much they control is a completely different story. But yeah, I don't know. Does that answer what we were talking about? I don't really remember at this point.
Yeah, I think so. We were just talking about like, are there nefarious interests in the dev community the same way there were in Bitcoin that allowed it to be taken over by Core? Everyone should read that story and hijacking Bitcoin. If you don't like Roger Ver, get over it. Read the book. You'll understand. He's not malicious. He's not a scammer. He's just really autistic, and he's a great guy. He's not even really autistic. He's mildly autistic, and he's a very good-hearted person. Like you're gonna see you'll see the whole story if you read that book. It's a phenomenal account of what happened.
Yes, that's actually, if I could levy any criticism against Roger, would be that he's a good-hearted person. A lot of times he's made mistakes by trusting sketchy people too much and just being too genuine in this kind of case. But it's definitely something worth looking at. There was a little bit of that type of stuff going on with the Bitcoin privacy stuff in terms of like the CoinJoin community, because obviously Samurai Wallet was like the kind of most hardcore of the CoinJoin functionalities or whatever, and they really hated the Wasabi people and vice versa. And it seems like Wasabi had, first of all, when they got implemented into Trezor, they had a like chainalysis kind of thing where it wouldn't allow you to mix coins if they determine them to be from a tainted origin. And they're also the overwhelmingly more popular CoinJoin, as far as I know, CoinJoin implementation. But there was a structural vulnerability in Wasabi where there would be very occasional address reuse. And as soon as you do that, it just ruins the whole thing. And odds are what the Bitfinex hackers got caught because of this bug in Wasabi that they used and some other things. So then that goes towards like the honeypot theory of like, why are there such toxicity between these things? Oh, because some people are kind of legit. Let's say, again, I'm steel manning Samurai. I don't actually know them well enough to know that they were blameless or whatever. But clearly there were some issues with Wasabi that caused some people to get busted. And you could say maybe at the same time, maybe Wasabi is more successful, and the Samurai people were kind of, I mean, because they're in prison now, I doubt that they were the spooks. But if they were, then maybe they were toxic and fudding Wasabi because they're trying to keep the overall amount of privacy down in Bitcoin. And then you could then talk about, Tornado Cash and Railgun, that maybe, some of them are spooks here. You could speculate forever, right?
Yeah, Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's the kind of the hard part about being privacy conscious and a little conspiratorial is like everything starts to look like a psyop, and you can lose it a little bit. My solution to that, after going down the privacy rabbit hole several years ago, was just use privacy selectively for the things you need it for, and then everything else just be above board and try not to share cancelable things over ClearNet, but at the same time, like, I don't really abide by that. Like, I'll just say whatever I'm thinking, because I think recently I've had like a pivot from try to hide things to just do whatever you want, but do it well and do it fast. So, like, regulation right now is unclear. Projects should be launching. Like, people should be going for stuff. There's not going to be more favorable regulatory conditions than the ones we'll have under the Trump administration, looking back retroactively at this time period. So, for all the stuff we talk about, like for all the talk about privacy and like being like against the government, hiding everything you're doing and all this kind of thing, I think that's not always the best approach, because things can all tend to look nefarious if you look at them long enough.
Yeah, for sure. And it's kind of like, I think one of the reasons why people don't have perfect knowledge as far as anything, as far as what works, what doesn't, what will happen, what won't happen, all that stuff. But what people do have is, that's why people have like morals and principles a lot of times, because those things tend to make big batch process decisions for people in the future, where it's like, well, if I follow this one rule, it will micro make a bunch of decisions where I don't have perfect knowledge. So like, for example, if you always push decentralized tech forward, use it wherever you can, use privacy for everything. But even if you're not a criminal, especially if you're not a criminal, use privacy for everything. And what if they see you? Who cares? You're not a criminal. But like, if they don't see you, then there's just less data out there for data farming and companies and governments out there. And if you normalize it and there's more, and then everything is good. So you don't have to think about like, well, am I a criminal? Do I use criminal tech? Do I this and that? Do I have anything to hide? You just like say, I'm not hiding anything unless I want it out there, and I'm doing my best, and then that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess we probably differ on this a little bit, because for a while I was using like graphene for a phone, and it was cool, but it's like, it's clunky, right? And sometimes it's like, if you are, depends what your threat model is. That's what I'd say it comes down to. It depends what your threat model is. And for a while, we had a policy of not using ChatGPT for anything at Token Dynamics. And I realized that was like probably hindering our growth. So now, like, we're not feeding in mission critical information or like client information or we're not storing like sensitive info about top tier projects, like top secret projects that need to be like underground in public, surveillable places. We are using DDoS. We are using Signal for chats for like the sensitive stuff. Like, we're using these tools, but I think like coming from a principled stance is nice as a place to live by, and like certainly ethically you want to stand on principles and not waver from that, but then practically standing on the principle of like, I'm only going to use privacy tech can be like counterproductive. And I think people get in the worst case, like, get very paranoid about surveillance, which is where I got for a while, and in the best case it just slows you down a lot if you're trying to do anything important. So figuring out what your threat model is and tailoring your actions appropriately is good for the people that want to be effective. And it's a radical take in a room full of crypto anarchists. But that's been my experience and my
yeah. Well, that's the thing. I kind of feel like when you have principles and best practices that you follow, the smart people, maybe I'm accidentally talking shit to people I shouldn't be talking shit to, but I feel like the smart people understand what it's for. Like your values systems is you understand the purpose of them, that they're there to help you make better decisions and make your life better. So you use them as a tool, right? You do best privacy practices because it's good for you, but where it doesn't make sense for you, you don't have to use them, right? Where like, like for example, for me, it does actually make sense to do the whole living entirely on crypto, no bank thing, because I have to learn. A lot of my career is built around the knowledge that I could only have if I do that. So for me, it makes sense. But like, if I'm not going to tell everyone, y'all got to close your bank account. I'm like, does it make sense? Maybe. I mean, does it make sense to have like way less fiat and way more crypto in your own control? Absolutely. Do you need to go hardcore? Do you? Maybe not. It's one of those things where like the people who are not smart enough to understand it, they just like cling to it. Like, no, I can only use this. I can only do that. And like, I have to say personally, graphene has worked out very well for me. The only problems were I could not do tap and pay for these kind of prepaid sketchy cards that I use. But I did do a sandbox profile that connects to a watch that can do it. So I fixed that problem.
That's cool.
And it works really well. The one problem that I had hit with in the last week is now my Twitter app won't work. My X app, they rugged. You need to have it installed from the Google Play Store or it just won't work. And I did not manage to get the progressive web app version working yet. So as of now, my phone has no X. So that is a bit of a sacrifice.
That's probably a blessing in disguise.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what my point is. Like, if people want to, I do also have a Googled phone that I just didn't get rid of yet, and I keep it in a Faraday bag, but sometimes I need my TikTok, and like I'm gonna just do TikTok on that. All right. I don't like it's fine, just
it's a different threat model, and I think what you do is prove that all of these things are possible for anyone that wants to do them, which is really like I think encouraging and cool to see.
Absolutely. Well, it's probably good wrap up time. What do you think?
Yeah, 2 hours on the dot, just about. Great podcast episode, man.
Yeah, thanks. It's always good when people could go a little longer too, because I just found out that it just stuff works out better. Like the views get better, the conversation gets better once you extend past the 1 hour mark. I think I'm not going to be like the Rogan of things where I'm just like 3 hours, man. Can you do 3 hours? Like I would, but it just, I feel like we said what we needed to say here in 2.
Definitely. Yeah. Especially when we're talking about like current events and things, kind of just weighing in on stuff. And Rogan works 3 hours because it's subject matter experts talking about whatever they're doing or interested in.
Yeah. Or it's an in-person hang. I kind of feel like doing a 3 hour Zoom call type deal. It's if it makes sense. I have done those too, but like it's only when it makes sense. Sometimes I do that with holiday specials, like on Christmas or New Year's. I do like a 3-4 hour one where people come and go, sort of. And it's like that's more like an X space, it's like a hang. But for these types of things, it is what it is. So I'm gonna shill. It's shill o'clock. I'm going to show your thing for you, just throwing up the Token Dynamics website. And anything other than that, follow you at, was it official ESC on X?
Yeah, just Token Dynamics on X and official ESC on X. So Token Dynamics does protocol design with a focus on value accrual and economic security. And we, of course, do traditional tokenomics, so leading people from protocol inception to token generation, TGE. So we're working on a censorship-resistant launchpad as our latest R&D project. Stay tuned. Follow us. Follow me if you want to keep up with that kind of stuff. And reach out in DMs. DMs are open. Token Dynamics or official ESC on X.
Yeah, and random other shell. Someone in the chat was talking about like privacy AI models and stuff. and I don't need to because they don't pay me, but I might as well shill Nano GPT, which is done by some friends of mine. But basically, it pays you go with crypto for as little as 10 cents to access all the modern AI models, such as,
I have been looking for this. Great.
I will send you an actual link
Thank
because
you.
it does link into that. They don't know the prompt. They don't know who sends the prompts through their stuff. So it's
like
about
you
as
could do NIM, like NIM VPN and MixNet to anonymize your IP address, and then go ask an LLM a question that you don't want the NSA to know what you're asking.
Yeah.
Like you're asking like some personally, like I need advice on this personal life choice that you don't want the NSA to blackmail you about 5 years in the future. You can do that through GPT.
So the privacy, I don't know if it's like what I would call like that, like military grade privacy kind of thing, because everything does go through like Google and all the other terrible companies.
Yeah.
But Nano GPT doesn't know about it, and these places just know a Nano GPT user did it. Kind of like Railgun, like someone in there.
You have to sign up for it, or could you just send them like credit, like some cryptocurrency?
Yeah, it's like in the browser, so you don't need an account at all, and you can just pay as you go. And if you need a refund, they refund you in Nano, that feeless crypto, and so you just can do that, or you can get an actual like account, which is just an email, and that's it. And if you want to like do referral links, or you want to like keep a balance in case your cash gets cleared and you lose whatever money you have on it, so you can do both. But like you can do it totally anon, and just if you just say like Nate, who are there any active bounties or warrants out for Nate at EatSleepCrypto's arrest or something? Who's going to be looking that up? Like someone's going to figure. So don't be an idiot, or don't tell me here's the medical records of this person, diagnose any symptoms. It's like, oh, it's probably that person who's asking. Like, how else do you have it?
Right.
It's all out there. So be aware of that. But other than that, there you go.
Right. Sweet. Awesome. Well, it's been great talking with you. I'm glad we got to do another podcast together.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime. Everyone, thanks for watching. Subscribe. I'm throwing the shill in the live chats just in case anyone wants to do GPT and try out that stuff. Thanks for watching. Subscribe on all these different platforms. Hope X doesn't try to rug me next time. I'll see you guys next week. Can't remember who I had on next week, but it's gonna be a good one. It's always a good one, dude. Oh yeah, the other thing, I'm gonna shill my conference tour. May's gonna be a busy month for me. I'm going to ETHDAM in Amsterdam. After that, I'm going to Blockchain Futurist and Consensus in Toronto, which are back to back, of course. Then I'm speaking at Crypto Basel in Switzerland. And then after that, it's the Bitcoin and Litecoin conference in Vegas. So I know people don't like, Naomi doesn't tell people where, Naomi Brockwell doesn't tell people where she is until she's left them. I will be at these conferences. I'm not telling you which dates I'm traveling or anything, but just show up to these conferences if you want to like assassinate me. I mean, hang out and stuff. So, yeah, there you go. Follow me on X at the Desert Links. Follow me everywhere. On the Hive blockchain, I am unfortunately the Desert Linux because I've lost my keys to my other account. So that's what I am. All right. Have a great weekend, everyone. Don't get too hammered. Bye-bye.